Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Welcome back to another episode of our Nuclear Revenge series, where you'll get to hear stories about people's lives getting absolutely obliterated. In today's episode, you'll hear 3 stories. The first one was sent to me by a subscriber who doesn't have a Reddit account, where he gets revenge on a landlord who sets an apartment on fire. The second story is about OP getting revenge on a con man who steals her life savings. Before we get into the stories, please hit that like button if you enjoy hearing nuclear revenge stories and subscribe for future stories. Let's dive in. This first story was sent to me by Adam, and it's titled, The Destruction of My Landlord. I regretfully got an apartment with, in my opinion, the worst landlord ever. This man, who I'll call Eddie, had the audacity to call himself a good person in court. Let me fill you in. I got an apartment shortly after being released from prison. I was happy that someone was giving me a chance to improve my life, but this was clearly not the case. All was well for the first few months, but then winter hit and the heat went out. It took 3 days to get Eddie to even answer his phone. By that time, his voicemail was full of complaints from his freezing cold tenants. He told me the law gave him a reasonable time frame to fix it. We went 2 more weeks with no heat, using our stoves and camping in the kitchen in our respective apartments. When Eddie got his electricity bill, he attempted to raise the rent on the apartments. This was obviously not allowed by the city, so he refused to pay his electricity bill, thus denying all of us heat entirely. This is where my OCD kicked in, and I went into full research mode. I studied every law regarding federal, state, and city landlord-tenant laws and rights. I found so many violations that it was no longer funny but scary. I studied the building code and the condition of all his apartments. This was easier because I was either good friends with his tenants or had gone there to repair damages caused by frozen pipes and electrical outlets failing due to shoddy wiring. Eddie had upset every single one of his tenants. Every last one was so angry that they wanted to testify against him in court, but couldn't due to the financial hardships the living conditions were causing. I formulated a plan to get him to repair the buildings he owned, but Eddie had his own plan. On January 2nd at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by the smoke detectors in the whole building going off. I quickly ran to the back hall because no smoke was in my apartment yet, but I was on the top floor. I opened the door and was greeted by a thick wall of smoke. I quickly ran downstairs after shouting for my girlfriend at the time to get out of the house fast. I pounded on every door and screamed, "Fire!" as the smoke rapidly filled the hallways. I got as many people as possible to evacuate, but on the floor where the fire was, no one was answering, and to my knowledge, it contained children. I panicked. At this point, the fire department was there and began breaking in doors. The fire in the building was quickly spreading. 2 weeks later, the results were released. Arson. It turned out a tenant had used hairspray to start the fire and hid the evidence in a hole she punched into the wall. I suspect Eddie paid her off for doing that. Ironically, she was the only tenant who had paid rent in the whole building because she had started moving in 2 days prior. I hadn't known she was now a tenant, and her sister and kids had moved out the day before. I looked at Eddie and told him I knew what he had done and was not going to rest until he lost all his buildings. I then began asking his tenants for their stories about their interactions with Eddie, and this is where things got real. He had been accused of everything from ripping off employees to theft, grand theft auto, bank fraud, and so much more. I formulated a new plan. I sucked up to him and made it known that I'm a computer tech. Eddie had quite a few broken computers and some printer and network issues, so I was in. We worked out a deal on payment for back rent, but he wasn't good for his word. That was all part of the plan. Once I got his password and logins, I copied his entire hard drive to my portable one. I copied all the emails in his business account and printed his financial records. After I fixed his computers and network, I went home to review my newfound evidence. It was enough, more than enough. I contacted code enforcement with all the violations of code for every building, including the illegal electrical installation in his new office without permits or even an electrician. He was immediately investigated. That night, I found a 7-day notice to quit on my door. My roommate was worried, but I filled him in on the plan. Remember, I studied all those laws and rights. In court, I opened with, "Your Honor, I have proof of a clear violation of the Warranty of Habitability Act." The eviction was thrown out, and he was forced to repair my apartment with me still in it immediately. The next month, I was given another eviction notice. He was still losing money because I was teaching his tenants about landlord rights and the laws associated with them. He kept losing his court dates, was told to fix his properties, and was continuously fined by the courts and code enforcement. He was sinking fast. I wasn't done yet. We went to court again for my non-payment of rent. I won again based on the Landlord Retaliation Act because I had contacted code enforcement and could prove this blatant retaliation. The judge didn't even listen to Eddie. Spending the winter without heat took a toll on his tenants. We got electric heaters and informed the power company that the landlord had shut off all the power to his building and was requiring tenants to pay for their own power. Apparently, his illegal wiring caught up to him. He had wired the apartments to run off each other, and the common areas were now attached to wiring in every apartment. This put Eddie in a rough position. As local law states, it's the landlord's responsibility to supply power to all common areas. His shoddy workmanship and illegal wiring prevented him from legally disconnecting the power. The power company turned on all the power and locked his ability to shut it off until all the wiring in the common areas was repaired and separated from the apartments. This would cost thousands of dollars, thousands we knew he didn't have. He was panicking. He kept losing court cases, people were legally withholding rent, he couldn't shut off services, and the fines were debilitating. He kept blaming his tenants and refused to repair things. One by one the buildings were condemned, and Eddie was required by law to pay for the relocation of his tenants. He didn't. He couldn't. He was arrested for attempting to sell 3 buildings that the city confiscated from him, and for selling one that was condemned. He wanted to get a lawyer but couldn't afford it. Eddie got what he deserved. He lost every building he owned, got charged with all kinds of fraud, and was investigated for other crimes that I'm still unaware of. But I wasn't done. He caused a lot of suffering. I gave his financial records to the IRS with all the internal memos and everything I got from his computers. I also provided the local authorities and code enforcement with the same things. Eddie was so screwed. I've since gotten a new apartment, and everything he owned has been taken by the city, state, and IRS. I haven't seen Eddie in 3 years, and all his properties have been bought by someone new. All the new tenants are happy with their landlords. Oh, and about Eddie and the lady who started the fire? The woman who started the fire was arrested for first-degree arson and charged with 2 counts because the fire was intentional. She ratted him out, saying he paid her to set the fire to get less jail time. In the end, he's serving multiple sentences for crimes he's committed, and he's not getting out for at least 5 to 10 years since they also charged him with first-degree arson as an accomplice. Eddie is somewhere in some prison regretting meeting this tenant. Oh my goodness, OP was the wrong person to mess with in this story. Eddie really takes the cake for being a horrendous landlord. Who the heck starts a fire in an apartment building with people still inside sleeping? A complete maniac, that's who. He deserves all those years in prison, no doubt about it. Let me know your opinions on the story by voting in the poll. This next story is titled, Someone Stole $25,000 from Me, and it ended up costing him $500,000. As a preamble, I was married to a very OCD and pragmatic man. For example, for him, a big romantic gesture was leaving me alone for 24 hours at the hospital right after I had our son so he could go pay the bills and mow the lawn. I was in dire need of physical contact because he never touched me unless he wanted intimacy, and he also never kissed me. But this story is not about him. It's only a preamble. I divorced him, not just for the reasons above, mind you. I felt alone and unloved in that relationship. I wrote about it to explain the state of mind I was in when I met this other person, who we'll call PS. PS was the total opposite. He was very in tune with his emotions, very intense, and this will be important later. He really showed me the love I thought I needed. On our first dates, the waitress asked how long we'd been together since he was so into me and touching me. He made me feel amazing. He had this huge house and a rather flashy lifestyle, so I assumed he was really well off. He told me he owned a car wash and a phone marketing company. Fast forward a bit. At this point, we had been dating for about a year, and he had just asked me and my son to move in with him. I wasn't 100% sure, but he prepared a room for my son nonetheless. As I started spending more time in his house, I noticed strange behavior. He'd be up all night but sleep all day. I also overheard a few phone calls where he was telling people they owed money and needed to pay, but the conversations didn't fit with a car wash or a phone marketing business. At some point, he told me he was having money problems and said huge clients were late in paying, which was jeopardizing his house payments. So, naive me offered to help. It ended up with me lending him $25,000, and I cannot for the life of me remember that progression. The loan was supposed to be for 3 weeks. He said I'd have it all back in 3 weeks. That $25,000 was basically my life savings. It came from our retirement savings and my son's college money, so I had to pay a fine to access it. It also took me 10 years to put aside. That money was very important to me. During those 3 weeks, I went out to have drinks with my friends and found him on a date with another woman. I saw him touching and kissing another woman. I said nothing, went to his house, packed my stuff, and left. I thought he'd be an adult and reimburse the $25,000 at the end of the 3 weeks, which was a big mistake. Someone I knew told me they were glad I left and proceeded to tell me about him. They said PS was a con man, a specialist in defrauding older people by phone, and that was his so-called phone marketing company. I wasn't sure I believed it, but then bits of what I overheard in the last year started to make sense, and I realized it was all true. I tried getting my money back in many different ways, none of which worked. I was at the end of my rope, and since it was in my first year post-divorce, I had basically used my life savings. I was broke. So, this is what I did. First, he had given me access to pay bills online, not to his bank accounts but to his emails. I was able to investigate all his accounts with the same password. I printed and took screenshots of every little bit of information relating to money. I found proof that he was indeed scamming people and found the people he worked with, including the name of the person at Western Union who facilitated the money transfers. I found out he was an organized criminal who operated between the US and Canada. I started preparing for Nuclear Strike 1. For Strike 1, I printed his face and the faces of everyone working for and with him who were defrauding people and left hundreds of flyers in the neighborhood. I also called the hotline for financial crime prevention in both Canada and the US and gave very specific details and names. Strike 2, I was naive in lending him money, but at least I did it the right way. I was smart enough to write a check instead of using cash because I wanted a paper trail, and it turned out to be a great idea. On the check, I had written that it was a loan. Thank you, Judge Judy, for the tip. Since he didn't pay me back, I prepared an invoice and sent it to myself from his hacked email. When the time came to do my taxes, I filed the $25,000 as an expense using his invoice, and it passed. Strike 3. Don't ask me how I got his social security number, but I ended up having access to it. I reported him to the IRS for hiding income. I found out later through friends that the IRS started investigating him for unpaid taxes. I heard he had to pay 38% in taxes on that $25,000, plus a 20% fine for not declaring income. At this point, I was satisfied. I figured $9,500 in taxes plus $5,000 in fines was 50% of what he owed me. At least he didn't get away with it all. Remember, I wrote on the check that it was a loan. So I decided to take him to court, and I won since he didn't even show up. He had to reimburse the full $25,000 plus court fees plus what he owed to the IRS. That's $39,500 he had to pay for not reimbursing the $25,000. To this day, I still haven't seen a cent, but the rest of the story makes it worthwhile. At first, I thought the financial crime call I made had no effect. Well, now it's the cherry on top. What I didn't know at the time was that the IRS would team up with the wire fraud division and look at everything he did. They weren't able to catch him on wire fraud, but since the house he had didn't match the money he was declaring, they got him on tax evasion and gave him a certain period to pay back taxes. I heard it was only 3 months, but I don't know if that was accurate. They got him so well that they ended up freezing his accounts and he lost his house. His debt to the IRS is still open. My $25,000 that he didn't want to repay me ended up costing him over $500,000. Since you cannot go bankrupt for a debt you owe to the government, I'm happy to tell you that at 40 years old, he had to move back in with his parents, apply for welfare, and will probably be paying this for the rest of his life. The story isn't finished, however. I just learned that he has a job as a concierge in the apartment building of his parents, so I'll be contacting the court to have the money he owes me taken directly from his pay. The last thing is, he has no idea that I'm the culprit of all his bad fortune. He recently sent me a message telling me that he misses me, that I was an angel for him, and that he regrets what he did. Well, not me, loser, not me. The next story, it's one of the craziest nuclear revenge stories I've read in a long time, and it's titled, I refuse to donate my kidney to the brother who ruined my life, and I don't regret it. I, Ryan, have a twin brother named Sebastian, and we've never been close. In fact, he made my life miserable growing up, and my parents didn't help by playing favorites. They do things like get him better gifts on birthdays, only go to see films he liked at the cinema, and give him extra money for housework despite us doing the same amount of work. Throughout our childhood, he would always put me down, belittle me, bully me with his friends at school, and break my stuff. My parents would always blame me for the things he did, saying it was my fault. Growing up, the two people I could rely on were my older sister, Jane, my cousin, Kai, and my best friend, Isaac. who all knew what an awful person my brother was. I don't know if my parents recognized it but simply ignored it or what. Anyway, fast forward to when I was 17 and I had my first girlfriend, someone I loved very much. We didn't have sex because she wanted to wait until her 18th birthday, but it turns out she was having an affair with my brother behind my back for half the time we were together. It was only revealed when she got pregnant. I was crushed. She knew how much I hated my brother and saw some of the awful things he did to me, yet she still went and did that. Cheating is bad enough, but to cheat on me with him, of all people, had me livid. I punched him in the face, which resulted in a broken nose and a missing tooth. According to my parents, I was the one in the wrong. And now we had to help this girl who was carrying my brother's child and support them. My brother then came out and said he had no intention of being a father and told my girlfriend to get an abortion. She then ran out of town and I never saw her again. I don't know if she kept the baby or not. All I know is that she was gone and my folks were still praising my brother as the golden child. Another year went by. My brother and I still despised each other, but I had started dating again. It took a while, but I found someone, a guy I liked. I'm bisexual, and this new guy named Daniel, whom I'd met at college, caught my eye. He was deaf, and I had studied sign language out of boredom, so we got to talking, and things just seemed to click. We dated, fell in love, and I brought him to my friend Isaac's party to introduce him to his friends. It felt great. At this point, the only one who knew I was bi was Isaac. But one day, while walking into a cinema holding my boyfriend's hand, I bumped into my evil twin, Sebastian. He pointed, laughed, and said some horrendous things. When I got home after dropping my boyfriend off, I knew I'd be facing something as I walked through the front door. When I came home, I saw both my parents on the sofa. My mother was crying about how on earth she could have given birth to someone so disgusting, and she was talking about me, saying I was a stain on the family's name. My father got up to yell at me. At this point, I saw my brother up the staircase with a grin on his face. He then came down and said he was uncomfortable sharing a room with someone like me. My folks kicked me out right then and there with what little clothes and money I had. I went to Isaac's house, and his family took me in, where I stayed for 6 months. For the first time in a while, I actually experienced familial love and affection. Isaac's mother and stepdad were great. I considered them my own parents. Eventually, I got a 2-bedroom flat with Daniel and Isaac, and all was great for the time being. Fast forward to December last year, Daniel and I are now married. Isaac was the best man, and my sister and cousin Kai walked me down the aisle. I also have a brilliant job in graphic design. We have our own house by the sea, and life has never been better. One day, however, I got a call from my sister saying that my brother was in the hospital. I hadn't thought about him much over the 9-year period since I was kicked out, but being reminded of his existence brought up a lot of painful memories for me. I was told by my sister that Sebastian wanted to see me and that it was urgent. So I went to the hospital he was in and met my sister outside the front entrance. I asked her what this was about, but she didn't tell me. She said I needed to ask my twin brother. I went to the room where my brother was and found my parents at his bedside. They actually looked happy to see me, which was funny. They looked at me lovingly as if what they did to me hadn't happened at all. My brother, Sebastian, was so relieved to see me. It's safe to say something was off. Eventually, I asked what was going on and why I was even brought there. My brother told the family to leave us alone. Sebastian looked so weak and frail, not the guy he used to be who intimidated me so much. He told me he was dying from kidney failure and had been for the past few years, and it had gotten to the point where he didn't have much time left. I knew immediately where this was going. He then said he always regretted that we never got along, at which point I told him, no. He looked confused and said, no, what? I simply told him that I wasn't going to donate my kidney to save him. The look on his face said it all. His world was crumbling around him. He went on about how bad the situation was and that he was really sorry for all the things he'd done to me growing up. I told him that I just wanted a brother who cared and loved me and who wouldn't try to break me every day for 18 years. He then called in our mom and dad and told them that I wasn't going to give up my kidney. They started spouting off that I owed them for my existence and that I had a duty to look after my family. Excuse me? What family? Did they seem to forget that I was basically disowned for coming out? I asked them where that duty was when they kicked me out of the house or where that duty was every time my brother gave me a black eye. I told them that for all the things he'd done, from outing me for being bi to having an affair with my girlfriend and abandoning his child, this was the universe's way of finally giving back what he dished out to bite him in the butt. I then turned around and walked out of the room, and that was the last time I ever saw Sebastian. Not sure why they'd want a kidney from someone who was a stain on the family anyway. I walked past my sister, who gave me a look. I gave her a look back, to which she then said, "I understand." After leaving the hospital, I felt as if a great weight had been taken off my shoulders. I went home and never looked back, pleased with my decision. Last week I got a call from my sister informing me that Sebastian had passed away. She asked if I was okay, and I said that I didn't really feel anything, but, in all honesty, I was 100% okay. She said she understood to a degree, as Sebastian hadn't been that kind to her over the years either. The next day I was getting calls and text messages from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me that I'm going to hell for being a bad son, a bad brother, and a walking sin. This made me second-guess my choice of not giving my brother my kidney. Even in death, he's making things harder for me. I did wonder if I was a bad person and if I made the wrong decision, but I knew that if I was in his position, I would have been left for dead. Forget him. Other bits of information that may clear things up? First, his renal failure was from living a hardcore lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. Second, my folks and sister did get themselves tested to see if they were matches, and none of them were. Third, I disowned them as family years ago, apart from Jane, so when I got married I took my husband's last name, as did Isaac, which his folks were very pleased about. Fourth, Kai's folks and my dad's brother have actually called to see how I'm doing, and say they don't judge me for what happened. Others, however, have continued to harass me, whom I've now blocked. Fifth, if he had been a good brother throughout my life, I'd have donated without a second thought. I'd have done the same for Jane, Kai, Isaac, and my husband, but I felt he didn't deserve it. Sixth, it's unlikely I'll ever see my parents again, and I'll make sure my children never meet them. My revenge is that I'll be a better parent than they ever were. Wow, guys, what an insane revenge. The original poster is 100% correct, though. I'm pretty sure if he was in the same position as his brother Sebastian, there's no telling what the parents might have done. There's a good chance that his brother may have refused to donate his kidney as well, and his parents may have supported that decision. It's unfortunate that they couldn't find a match from another donor, and that Sebastian suffered the fate he did, but hey, some people do get what's coming to them. Unfreaking real! Below are my opinions on each of the stories. Story 1. The Destruction of My Landlord. Holy cow, this story is a wild ride. Eddie sounds like the landlord from hell, letting tenants freeze without heat, ignoring building violations, and allegedly paying someone to commit arson. That's next-level villainy. Your OCD-fueled research into landlord-tenant laws and your gutsy move to copy his hard drive were pure genius. Exposing his illegal wiring and fraud to code enforcement and the IRS, leading to him losing all his buildings and landing in prison for arson and fraud, feels like a blockbuster movie ending. The fact that the arsonist tenant ratted him out is the cherry on top. You're a hero for saving your neighbors from that nightmare and turning the tables on a scumbag like Eddie. This story is a masterclass in strategic revenge. Story 2. Someone stole $25,000 from me, and it ended up costing him $500,000. This one had me cheering for you. P.S.'s charm and flashy lifestyle, hiding his conman ways, scamming you out of your $25,000 life savings, is infuriating. Catching him cheating and then uncovering his fraud ring was a gut punch. But your revenge was nuclear. Printing flyers, reporting him to financial crime hotlines, using the loan check's paper trail to claim it as a tax expense, and tipping off the IRS about his hidden income, that's a multi-pronged takedown. Costing him over $500,000, his house, and forcing him back to his parents' place on welfare is poetic justice. The fact that he's clueless you orchestrated it all makes it even sweeter. This story's a testament to outsmarting a con artist at his own game. Story 3. I refused to donate my kidney to the brother who ruined my life, and I don't regret it. Wow, this story hit me hard. Sebastian's relentless bullying, from breaking your stuff to sleeping with your girlfriend and outing you, is heartbreaking. Made worse by your parents' blatant favoritism. Getting kicked out for being bi is unforgivable, and their audacity to demand your kidney after disowning you is mind-blowing. Your refusal to donate, standing firm in that hospital room, was a powerful moment of reclaiming your dignity. The way you walked away, supported by your sister and chosen family, is inspiring. Your resolve to be a better parent than they ever were is the ultimate revenge, living well despite their cruelty. I don't blame you for feeling nothing at his passing. He reaped what he sowed. This story's a raw, emotional triumph over a toxic family. That's it for today's episode of Nuclear Revenge. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to leave a comment and a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll send a puppy to your house because, after hearing this story, a lot of us could use a puppy. See you all in the next one.